Welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Here are today's top stories. A top House Republican predicts Liz Cheney could lose her leadership position next week. Why is he saying that he thinks Cheney shouldn't represent them anymore? The debate rages over whether the World Trade Organization should ease patent restrictions on vaccines. We hear from vaccine experts and a patent lawyer on the pros and cons of doing so. The Texas House of Representatives just passed a bill to safeguard elections in the state. A version of that bill is expected to be signed by the governor. This comes as Florida's new election bill immediately winds up in court. Maricopa County officials refuse to give routers to an election audit team despite a subpoena. We'll tell you what it means for the audit. The U.S. is sending more firepower to Afghanistan as U.S. troops withdraw. This as the Taliban makes hundreds of attacks and a school is bombed in the country. We hear from an expert about the potential for the Taliban taking control and supporting more terrorist organizations. A grand jury has indicted 4 officers, including Derek Chauvin, on federal civil rights charges. Chauvin was already found guilty of 3 murder charges in George Floyd's death in April, and he's been charged again with Thomas Lane, Tu Tao, and Alexander King. The indictment says the officers violated Floyd's rights with their deliberate indifference to his serious medical needs. A top House Republican says there are enough votes to remove Liz Cheney from her leadership role. He says they can't have a Republican conference chair reciting Democrat talking points. NTD's Jessica Beatty has the details.
Representative Jim Jordan told Fox News Wednesday the votes are there to remove Liz Cheney from her leadership position as GOP conference chair.
It's not enough.
Cheney's facing pressure because of her continued attacks on former President Trump.
You can't have a Republican conference chair taking a position that 90% of the party disagrees with, and you can't have a Republican Party chair consistently speaking out against the individual who 74 million Americans voted for.
In an op-ed in the Washington Post Wednesday, Cheney wrote, "The question before us now is whether we'll join Trump's crusade to delegitimize and undo the legal outcome of the 2020 election." On the other hand, Cheney's challenger for conference chair, Representative Elise Stefanik, says House Republicans need to work with Trump. She told Steve Bannon's War Room show Thursday, it's also about sending a clear message that the Republican Party is one team. And Cheney's facing mixed reviews in her home state, Wyoming. She already has 4 primary challengers for next year's election, including Wyoming State Congressman Chuck Gray.
She's always viewed the Congress as a stepping stone, and that's what this is about for her. She doesn't represent us and our Wyoming values.
He criticized her for voting with Democrats to impeach Trump.
It's another one of the left-wing insider narratives, the insiders and the left-wing group working together against President Trump, and that's what Liz Cheney represents, and what she is.
But some other well-known Wyoming Republicans are speaking out in Cheney's defense, including a former staffer who is also a state lawmaker.
And it would appear that a fealty test to Donald Trump is the measurement for staying as a real Republican, according to some, and it's just not true.
She says this isn't about policy, it's about Cheney's view of the 2020 election.
Is it a political risk? Yes, of course it is. But it's one she's taking because she's an honorable person who believes she must honor her oath.
Congressman Jordan says the caucus will likely gather next week and remove Cheney. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
2 former Democrat campaign chairs are sounding the alarm about the upcoming midterm elections. They say Democrats have some big challenges to overcome if they're going to keep their majority in the House. Representative Martin Frost says he's concerned about the number of retirements on the Democrat side. Former Representative Steve Israel says retirements and redistricting are 2 big problems for Democrats. Both are former chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. The National Republican Congressional Committee notes that Nancy Pelosi is extremely unpopular in Democrat-held districts that went for Trump. They say it will be hard for those Democrats to justify voting in lockstep with Pelosi, and they believe Republicans are poised to retake the House. But Pelosi says she's confident that Democrats will keep the majority. The Texas House advances a bill to improve election security. This as Florida's new election law immediately faces a court challenge.
The Texas House voted 81 to 64 in favor of a bill to change the state's election laws. Democrats tried to delay it by proposing over 130 amendments. 20 of them were ultimately adopted. The House bill is considered more moderate than what the Texas Senate passed. The two bills still need to be unified in a committee before they can head to the governor's desk. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is expected to sign the final version. Democrats complain that the changes will make it harder for minorities to vote. Republicans say they're designed to prevent fraud. One significant change prevents officials from sending out unsolicited mail-in ballot applications. At the same time, Florida's new election law is headed to court in two separate lawsuits. Prominent Democrat attorney Mark Elias is leading one of them. The NAACP is part of the group that filed another. The suits claim the law discriminates against minorities, the disabled, and senior voters. The suits take aim at ballot drop box security and new rules that block third parties from collecting absentee ballots. The Office of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the claims are meritless and grossly misrepresent the legislation. The governor's office tells the Epoch Times Florida's new election reforms make it easy to legally vote but hard to cheat. We look forward to defeating these baseless claims in court.
Maricopa County officials are refusing to turn over subpoenaed routers to election audit staff. They say it's over security and privacy issues.
Officials in Maricopa County say they can't provide access to router information subpoenaed for an audit of the 2020 election. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office sent a letter to audit liaison Ken Bennett Monday. It says they can't produce the routers or router images without endangering sensitive information. The letter says the information could endanger law enforcement and release private health information and social security numbers of residents. The attorney's office says they are looking for a safe way to release the information, but they have not found a solution. Maricopa County originally fought the subpoena from the Arizona State Senate, but a judge ruled that they have to comply. The subpoena includes all of the electronic equipment. Bennett tells KFYI, they told me personally weeks ago that they had taken all the routers and the internet connections and the hubs and everything out of the building so they could send it to us. He says the router logs were supposed to prove that none of the election equipment was connected to the internet. But he says, lo and behold, they don't show up in the equipment that they said will be delivered to us. The audit was supposed to be completed on May 14th. Bennett says the audit may now take longer.
Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms won't be running for a second term as mayor. She made the announcement in a lengthy statement and an accompanying video. Bottoms narrowly won a runoff election 4 years ago and rose to prominence in the Democratic Party. She was seen as a key ally for President Biden during his campaign, but she turned down a position in Biden's cabinet in December. Her profile continued to rise during the CCP virus pandemic and with the renewed attention on policing in the United States. In her statement, she didn't doubt her ability to be re-elected, but she also didn't say why she wasn't seeking re-election and didn't mention what she'd do next. The World Health Organization is calling for pharmaceuticals to share their CCP virus vaccine patents with poorer nations that are struggling to deal with the virus. Biden's on board with the proposal. The argument is that these poor nations would then be able to manufacture more vaccines. But the counter-argument is that patents are what drive research and development in the first place, so if we take them away, we might be undermining the path to future vaccines.
Drug makers on Thursday said President Biden's support for waiving patents of COVID-19 vaccines could endanger their supply chains, and that wealthy nations should instead share more. Biden on Wednesday threw his support behind a waiver after India and South Africa proposed to the World Trade Organization that pharmaceutical companies share their intellectual property rights to COVID-19 vaccines. India is the home of the world's biggest producer of vaccines, but it still has a major shortage during this devastating second wave. A vaccine expert advocates for more doses and explains the challenges poor countries face.
What we really need is very large numbers of doses without them costing too much. And some of the vaccines at the moment that are being used in the US and in Europe are really out of reach in terms of their cost for many of the countries in the world.
The WHO says just 7 out of every 100 vaccines studied in a lab actually make it to clinical trials. A pharmaceutical professor explains that there are simple protein vaccines that can be made in a lot of countries, and there are complex vaccines, including RNA, that can be only made in a few places.
The protein-type vaccine technologies, which have been used for really quite a long period of time, could be made locally in a multiplicity of different countries, whereas these more technical vaccines, the viral vector vaccines and the messenger RNA vaccines, are really, really new, and the numbers of manufacturing sites capable of making those is really rather low.
The counter-argument to waiving vaccine intellectual property is that the patents allow companies to invest money into researching new vaccines. A patent attorney argues there may be less incentive if the patents are waived.
And you would not have this kind of investment if there wasn't a proper reward for these companies. So the patent system was invented for this system, and I think it's, if I may say so, a bit silly to try and reinvent it now.
Pfizer and Moderna stocks dropped even at the mention of patents being waived. The two companies combined forecast a total of over $45 billion in sales this year for their vaccines.
Progressive lawmakers have pressured Biden to support the patent waivers, and according to the New York Times, the U.S. Trade Ambassador reiterated that the Biden-Harris administration's top priority is saving lives and ending the pandemic worldwide. But Washington-based Biotechnology Innovation Organization cautions against waiving the patents. That's because it says giving license to other countries, some our economic competitors, may hollow out the United States' world-leading biotech base and export jobs abroad. Nearly 200 illegal immigrants have been rescued from human trafficking situations involving stash houses, and the number of unaccompanied migrant children in federal custody reaches a historic high.
In the border city of Laredo, Texas, over 180 illegal immigrants have been rescued from 3 different stash houses. The rescues took place within hours of each other on Tuesday and were carried out by Border Patrol agents and law enforcement. Deputy Chief Patrol Agent Carl Landrum said that all of the people rescued from these stash houses were being held against their will. One of the houses contained 68 people, another 50, and the third 65. Those rescued were identified as nationals of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Mexico. Each was medically screened and processed accordingly. Landrum emphasized how dangerous human trafficking is. He urges the public to report any suspicious activity, saying you just might save a life. All 3 of the stash houses were shut down and those involved apprehended. And the number of unaccompanied migrant children in federal custody has hit another historic high. As of the 4th of May, nearly 25,000 minors are being held by either the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services or Customs and Border Protection. This is according to HHS. To put these numbers in perspective, this is more than any other time in U.S. history. That includes when the Trump administration was separating children and adults for DNA tests in 2018 and during the 2019 border crisis. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas said on Sunday that the time unaccompanied minors are spending in Border Patrol facilities is decreasing. He said the minors are now being held for an average of 20 hours. This is a dramatic drop from the 130-hour average in March. The legal maximum is 72 hours. The children are processed in Border Patrol facilities before they are moved on to the care of HHS, where the agency then tries to connect them to a sponsor in the United States. So far, under the Biden administration, HHS has opened 13 overflow facilities to hold the minors nationwide.
ICE says it carried out a record low number of deportations in April at just 3,000. The figure comes as illegal border crossings hit a 20-year record high. It's a reflection of the restrictions that the Biden administration has placed on the agency. An ICE spokesperson tells the Epoch Times that resources are being focused on the quality of the agency's work rather than the quantity of deportations. U.S. Customs and Border Protection released an operational update in April. It said more than 172,000 illegal immigrants were apprehended in March along the southwest border. The agency says compared to February, March saw a 100% increase of unaccompanied minors from Central America. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says American troops leaving Afghanistan will present a challenge for Afghan forces. He notes that they'll have to deal with the Taliban by themselves after the U.S. departure.
And certainly we hope through our continued support, the Afghan security forces can be effective. But they have pretty significant capability, but it's going to, we expect that this will be a challenge for them. So.
The U.S. military might continue to train Afghan security forces from other countries. Pentagon officials have also said they'll help Afghans monitor terror from other locations in the region. President Biden announced last month that all American troops will withdraw from Afghanistan by September 11th. NATO allies have said they'll do the same, and troops have already begun to leave. Austin noted that the drawdown is going according to plan. Military commanders have also said that additional forces will flow in to help security along with logistics. The U.S. is sending warplanes to Afghanistan to protect U.S. and coalition forces as they withdraw from the country. According to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 6 B-52 bombers and a dozen F-18 fighter jets have been deployed. This comes after a bomb exploded at a school in western Afghanistan on Monday, wounding 21 people, and there have been almost 300 attacks by the Taliban across the country in the last few days. Earlier, I spoke with counterterrorism expert Dr. Jeffrey Treisman on whether there may be a violent resurgence of the Taliban.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's to be expected. In many respects, we're going to see the Taliban go on the offensive. They're going to take advantage of this opportunity, take advantage of the departure of the United States and its ultimate withdrawal. So they're absolutely going to go on to an offensive here. We'll probably start to see it in the east and the south of the country, perhaps taking over Kandahar, and maybe even, in worst case scenario, an eventual march all the way to the capital itself, Kabul.
And are there concerns the Taliban will take control of the central government and possibly support other terrorist organizations, leading to another 9/11?
So that's a very interesting and challenging question. I think on the one hand, yes, certainly the Taliban does have the possibility of successfully reclaiming the government and governorship of the entire country. On the other hand, I think it's a false equivalent to suggest that if the Taliban were to regain control, that suddenly that in and of itself is going to result in a 9/11 attack or something of that magnitude. There's simply no evidence for that. It also deprives us of the reflection of the fact that the world and, of course, our national security and counterterrorism efforts have certainly dramatically changed over the past 20 years or so, that we can hopefully predict and interdict another terrorist strike of that magnitude. But I think it's wrong to equate Taliban control with another 9/11.
Still to come, the country deals with the pandemic's mental health toll on students now returning to school. One school district uses the services of a local hospital. It looks like the nation's second largest teachers union directly influenced the CDC's guidance on reopening schools. Congressman Greg Murphy now calling on the CDC's director to resign. NTD's Melina Weiskop has the story.
Congressman Greg Murphy tells us that he's lost confidence in CDC Director Dr. Walensky. He's calling on her to resign now after recently uncovered emails shows that a large teachers union influenced the CDC's latest reopening guidelines for schools.
The fact that those guidelines were essentially infiltrated and influenced by a political organization, that's unheard of. That shows that they have no credibility whatsoever. Really puts into question her leadership and what's going on. And so, yeah, I believe she does need to resign.
Before the CDC released its latest school reopening guidance in February, folks were expecting a fast return to in-person learning because public health experts said evidence showed it was safe to do so. But it raised eyebrows when the CDC guidance came out more restrictive than expected. Critics say the latest guidelines mean many schools that are now fully reopened would have to close again. Now it appears the CDC may have had some outside influence. Emails between the nation's second largest teachers union and the CDC show the union had some room to influence virus guidelines. The emails were obtained by watchdog group Americans for Public Trust. In one email, the American Federation of Teachers said it reviewed the draft of CDC's guidelines and was able to provide some initial feedback about possible ways to strengthen it.
As we know what the teachers union is doing now, they're putting off going back to school and, in my opinion, causing irreparable harm to students to further a political goal to gain influence in the future over things like wages and benefits, etc.
Some suggestions from the teachers union made their way straight into the CDC's guidelines, almost word for word. This includes requests for remote work exceptions for teachers who have documented high-risk conditions. And in the event of high community transmission results from a new variant, a new update of these guidelines may be necessary. The CDC hasn't yet responded to NTD's request for comment on this issue, but a spokesperson for the CDC did tell the New York Post that it's standard procedure for them to work with organizations who may be impacted by their guidelines. But Representative Murphy called this a smokescreen response. That's because he says that teachers' unions have been using the virus as a way to gain power and influence. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The teachers union told Fox they are in regular touch with agencies that set policies that affect their work and lives, including the CDC, and they did so during the Trump administration as well. The union president, Randy Weingarten, says although they were initially concerned about the CDC's conclusions, they respect that the staff take their responsibilities seriously. As the pandemic takes a toll on the mental health of students across the country, one school district in Allentown, Pennsylvania, is trying new ways to address their needs.
From stress to anxiety to depression, students' mental health has been strained by radical changes to life that fell heavily on America's children, and educators are trying to respond. One school district in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which serves around 9,000 students, has partnered with a local hospital to link middle and high school students with licensed clinicians for therapy sessions one-on-one. Brenda Dorenzo is Parkland School District's Director of Student Services.
One of the biggest things that we did was to partner with St. Luke's, and St. Luke's provided a therapy component to our school. It's called the YES program, and St. Luke's Hospital sent one of their psychotherapists into our schools, and they provide counseling services to students who would need that degree of help.
Educators across the country agree students' mental well-being became a bigger priority after the pandemic forced schools to shut down or operate with a mix of remote and in-person learning. Some students struggled to focus, and isolation, worry, and depression took a toll on many. According to a Reuters survey of U.S. school districts serving more than 2.2 million students conducted earlier this year, a majority of students reported signs of mental health issues. 8th grader Sarah Lundberg says remote learning was a struggle. Still, she was anxious about going back to school.
My anxiety about school and actually going to school, and my social anxiety kind of went it went a little bit up because I was going back to school, but I was very I'm glad that I had that social aspect because that I wasn't getting it at home. So it got better when I went back into school.
Concerns about mental health have led to a flood of new funding and initiatives aimed at helping schools navigate the pandemic's aftermath.
And soon, thinking of giving mom flowers for Mother's Day? Well, that beautiful bouquet could be an environmental disaster in the making. Find out about the hard work going on behind the scenes to ensure that bouquet is not only beautiful, but safe too. Washington, D.C. launches a campaign to attract visitors after the district lost money and jobs due to the pandemic. Stay tuned to find out more.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Customs and Border Protection agents are putting the pedal to the metal to get masses of flowers ready in time for Mother's Day. Although the flowers may look harmless at a glance, they all have to be thoroughly inspected before they can reach Mom's best vase. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
Flowers are the go-to gift for many Americans on Mother's Day, but you might have never considered the hard work that goes on behind the scenes in ensuring that the bouquet you give Mom doesn't wreak environmental havoc. Mother's Day is the busiest time of the year for flower imports, and Customs and Border Protection's agriculture specialists are inspecting flowers round the clock to ensure that moms across America enjoy a pest-free Mother's Day. This year, they've inspected over 1 billion cut flower stems bound for stores and homes across the country. Of those 1 billion flowers, nearly 2,000 pests were stopped in their tracks. Here's why this job is so important.
Our guys protecting American agriculture is protecting our farmers, our market, and the food supply.
And here's how it's done. CBP agriculture specialists inspect all flowers and plants by hand before they enter the U.S. to ensure they're free of pests and diseases. This requires shaking and sometimes bashing the flowers gently enough so the flowers aren't damaged, but hard enough to dislodge any insects. Magnifying glasses are used to locate the tiny and sometimes near microscopic pests and diseases. They're then sent away for further testing using advanced technology. According to CBP data, goldenrod, Peruvian lily, and chrysanthemums are the types of flowers most frequently stopped for carrying pests. Common pests found include the owlet moth and aphids, which can cause irreparable damage to the environment. Depending on the severity, infested shipments are treated, re-exported, or destroyed. Most of the U.S.'s cut flowers come from Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Guatemala, and the Netherlands. Over 95% of the imports are processed in Miami, New York, and San Diego. CBP also processes a large volume of flowering plants during the Mother's Day season. Most of these come from Canada. So when you give your mom that beautiful bouquet of flowers or pot plant this Mother's Day, you can tell her that not only a lot of thought went into the gift, but also a lot of hard work from our Customs and Border Protection agents too. Grace Coulter, NTD News, New York.
This Mother's Day, one mother of 5 is celebrated by her family as a loving woman who takes care of everything and everyone. NTD's Sapphire Quarter has the story.
May Barrios has wanted to be a mother from the time she was a teenager.
I thought that it was easy. You got married, you bought a house, and the next thing you had a baby.
She now has 5 kids, but it wasn't as easy as she thought. For one thing, she probably didn't realize the title of mom also includes the title of jungle gym, or that sometimes wearing your child is the only way to get things done. Her oldest daughter, Maya, says things haven't always been easy.
To let her know that no matter how hard the problems are, the arguments are, how many ups and downs we have, I love you no matter what. And I'm so thankful to have you in my life.
She's always the person when you need someone to cry to, someone to vent to, and someone to laugh with.
After adopting 2 kids, May wanted to conceive but couldn't. After over a year of trying, her friend approached her, saying her aunt wanted to pray over her. They went to the aunt's house to find the whole family gathered after a funeral.
And they prayed over me, and I conceived Maya the next month.
2 years to the day after her daughter was born, she had her son. Maya likes playing with her mom.
No. Say, you don't like to play with mommy? Yes. No.
He did admit he likes playing puzzles. She became a stay-at-home mom during the pandemic. It gave her a new perspective. In her blog, May had this to say about the hard times when the pandemic hit. This is a time for immeasurable growth for our countries, our families, and for us as moms. Just remember, growing is hard, and that's okay. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
A man accused in the breach of the U.S. Capitol is asking a judge if he can call his mother on Mother's Day. She's also accused of participating in the incident. Eric Munchel of Tennessee was seen on a viral video carrying plastic zip tie restraints inside the Capitol January 6th. His mother, Lisa Eisenhart, was also charged as part of the breach. The pair were released under strict conditions, including being banned from talking to any other co-defendants, including each other. On Thursday, Munchel's attorney asked a federal judge for permission for the call. He told the judge the two wouldn't talk about any aspect of the case. Munchel and Eisenhart have pleaded not guilty. There's no word on the judge's decision yet. As Washington, D.C. is lifting capacity restrictions and reopening some museums, officials are hoping to attract visitors this summer. The mayor just launched a giveaway to encourage people to visit.
Washington, D.C. is launching a multi-million-dollar campaign to boost tourism in the nation's capital. Mayor Muriel Bowser announced a $250,000 giveaway plan on Wednesday. 51 lucky winners from the region will earn prizes and gift cards, ranging from $500 to $25,000 to shop, eat, play, and stay in D.C. The hope is that this will help boost the economy after it was devastated last year. The Bureau of Labor Statistics shows nearly 72,000 jobs were lost in D.C., many of which were in the hospitality industry. Between March 2020 and March 2021, visitor spending in D.C. was down 68%, or $6.1 billion. The district lost nearly $500 million in tax revenue from visitor spending. The president of tourism marketing organization Destination DC talks about the pandemic's impact on the real estate industry in particular.
The overall real estate market has been hit significantly. The hospitality industry has really suffered significantly in so many different ways, and probably more than any other industry in Washington.
So this spring, Destination DC is launching a near $3 million advertising campaign to attract visitors back to the nation's capital. It targets potential visitors in Maryland and Virginia, as well as 50 million people that live within a 4-hour drive of D.C. Between 14 and 15 million domestic visitors are expected to visit D.C. in 2021.
But as D.C. is trying to attract visitors, Mayor Bowser imposed what some are calling harsh and confusing lockdown measures, banning dancing and standing at wedding receptions. That's even if people are wearing masks or are vaccinated. While making an appearance on CNN, the mayor doubled down and defended the move. She said an alternate headline could be that now you can host a wedding in Washington, D.C. New York's highest court agrees to hear a case involving an elephant named Happy. He's lived at the Bronx Zoo for 4 decades, but an animal rights group that feels Happy should be free to spend the rest of his days in an elephant sanctuary. The New York Court of Appeals took the case from the Non-Human Rights Project. The group says it's a historic moment for animal rights to have their appeal heard by a court, and they say they look forward to making their arguments. An earlier statement from the Bronx Zoo says that Happy is not kept in isolation and is well cared for. The zoo says specialists and staff members at the zoo believe it's best for Happy to remain in familiar surroundings. An uncontrolled Chinese rocket could reach the Earth this Saturday. Some are concerned that debris from the rocket could land in populated areas. All that and more on NTD News. China announced it's suspending its strategic economic dialogue with Australia. This is the latest setback for strained relations between Canberra and Beijing, but former White House official General Robert Spalding says this is actually a good thing for Australia.
China on Thursday indefinitely suspended all activity under a China-Australia strategic economic dialogue. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson also claimed that Australia is abusing so-called national security reasons due to a Cold War mindset and ideological discrimination, but didn't mention what specific measures prompted the action. General Robert Spalding of the Hudson Institute says it comes down to Australia's pushback against the CCP's influence.
They're trying to punish Australia economically for opposing, Chinese Communist Party's influence in their country. It's also sending a message to other countries not to interfere in what the Chinese Communist Party wants to do in their countries.
In 2018, Australia became the first country to publicly ban Chinese tech giant Huawei from its 5G network, and Beijing was furious. Bilateral relations worsened last year when Australia called for an independent investigation into the origins of the coronavirus, prompting trade reprisals from Beijing. Last month, Canberra canceled 2 Belt and Road Initiative deals struck by the state of Victoria, and China warned that ties were bound to worsen. Australia is disappointed with Beijing's decision to suspend the economic dialogue. However, General Spalding believes that this is actually a good thing for Australia.
The Chinese Communist Party uses those dialogues to basically give the perception that there is improvement in the cooperation of the two countries, when in reality they're just using it to stall and allow them to plunder the country even more.
Trade experts expect the bilateral tensions will not have a major impact on business, especially the iron ore trade, but it could impact Chinese investment in Australia.
A 21-ton Chinese rocket is falling towards the Earth. It's the biggest uncontrolled man-made object to fall from orbit in 3 decades, and it could arrive this Saturday. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on the story.
The U.S. Defense Department is estimating that the uncontrolled Chinese rocket will reach the Earth this Saturday. China launched the rocket last week to deliver a piece of their space station into orbit. The delivery was successful, but the rocket doesn't have safe re-entry features built into it, and now it's falling back to Earth uncontrolled. As it re-enters the Earth, it may not burn up completely in the atmosphere, and parts of it could crash land on Earth. The Pentagon spokesman says they cannot determine the precise point of re-entry until within hours after the rocket enters the Earth's atmosphere. Waves of concern have been flooding in that debris from the rocket may potentially land on inhabited areas. On Thursday, a CCP mouthpiece responded to those concerns. It accused the West of overhyping the situation. It went on to say the mass of the rocket is not substantial and it will easily burn up in the atmosphere. But the rocket actually weighs a massive 21 tons. It's the biggest uncontrolled man-made object to fall to Earth in 3 decades. China launched a similar rocket last year. It did not completely burn up in the atmosphere. Most of the rocket debris landed in the Atlantic Ocean last time. The White House is also chiming in. The press secretary says the U.S. calls on all nations to act responsibly in regard to space activities. But she did not say whether the U.S. would hold Beijing accountable if the rocket debris caused harm to anyone. This rocket launch won't be China's last. Beijing has in store 10 more rocket launches before the end of next year. A U.S. District Court judge has just dealt a blow to government efforts to delist military-linked Chinese companies. He suspended an investment ban on a Chinese company imposed under the Trump administration. Soon after the suspension, Chinese mapping technology company Luokeng said on Thursday that American stock exchange Nasdaq has withdrawn a decision to delist them. This sent shares of the company up by nearly 20%. A Nasdaq spokesman has declined a comment. Luokeng was a U.S. list of more than 40 companies subject to an investment ban. They have alleged ties to the Chinese Communist military. The district court judge in Washington issued a similar order in favor of Chinese smartphone maker Xiaomi in March. The judge said that Pentagon's designation process for Luokeng was flawed. He wrote in his decision, Luokeng's purported forays into space systems or its potential future contracts with the Chinese National Geospatial Information Center do not appear to have materialized. He added the U.S. government has not identified any technology transfer from Luokeng to Communist China. According to Chinese law, companies operating in China are required to comply when the regime demands them to transfer their technology.
Just ahead, a horrific shootout in Rio leaves 25 dead, including a police officer. Law enforcement there engaged a team of alleged drug traffickers as they tried to get away. And one Italian mule handler shares his tradition of using mules for work. He says the animals reach areas that machines can't. Find out more in just a moment.
We can't control political volatility, inflation, massive government debt, or the wild swings of the stock market. But we can control where we put our money. Gold is easily outperforming the stock market the last 20 years. Protect your money. Buy gold. For your free direct bullion guide to buying gold, call 1-800-757-7050. During the 2008 recession, Americans lost over $2 trillion from their 401ks. For many people, retirement was no longer an option. But do you know what tried and true investment nearly doubled its value following the recession? Gold. Protect your money. Buy gold. For your free direct bullion guide to buying gold, call 1-800-757-7050. Start your collection today.
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk. No matter what you're going through, I just want you to know I'm here. I've got your back. When you want to talk, I'm here.
At least 25 people are dead after a violent shootout in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It started as a standard police raid, but the Thursday police operation soon became one of the region's deadliest ever. TV images showed drug traffickers in the one neighborhood trying to escape by running across rooftops. That's as police arrived in armored vehicles with helicopters flying overhead. The gunfight between police and alleged drug traffickers forced residents there to shelter in their homes. One officer was killed. Authorities held a news conference showing the arsenal of weapons seized in the raid, including 6 assault rifles, 15 handguns, a machine gun, and 14 hand grenades. Police said in addition to drug trafficking, the gangs robbed trucks of cargo and held up commuter trains to steal from passengers. Is France facing a surge of violent acts? Many in France are asking, following the recent death of 2 police officers and big city riots increasing in frequency and severity. NTD's France correspondent David Vives has more.
A French policeman was shot dead on Wednesday in the south of France while trying to apprehend a man in the center of a city. The policeman was killed during what the media described as a routine police raid. According to this policeman, it's part of an increasing number of assaults against police in France in recent months.
I'm very sad. The policeman's children and his wife will never see him again. But I'm also very angry. We are more and more being attacked from everywhere. I'm not even talking of gangsters. The attacks now come from common thugs.
This follows the murder of a police woman 11 days ago. An Islamist terrorist killed the woman inside a police station. 2 days ago, these Paris residents threw fireworks at drug dealers, trying to chase them out of their district.
This is the point we're at. The police can't do anything. We are even being told not to intervene in some cases. So the population is beginning to organize themselves against drug dealers.
Police are also under increasing scrutiny, following accusations of racism.
Our government says one day that we are discriminating against people during police checks, and the next day they support us. They have to choose a side. For my part, I defend the policemen.
President Emmanuel Macron said last week 30,000 more policemen will be recruited to address the outbreak of violence across the country. According to a poll released on April 25th, 86% of French people say security will be a deciding factor in the next presidential election 1 year from now. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
London's Victoria and Albert Museum unveils a revamped gallery of Raphael's work. It comes about 2 weeks before the museum opens its doors for the first time this year.
Shut under lockdown, the doors of the Victoria and Albert Museum open again on the 19th of May. Visitors will be greeted by a revamped gallery of Raphael's work. The refurbished room was unveiled on the 6th of May to mark 500 years since the Italian Renaissance master's death. The 7 large tapestry designs are known as the Raphael cartoons. They were originally commissioned for the Vatican's Sistine Chapel and depict scenes from the lives of St. Peter and St. Paul.
The works that you see are probably some of the most significant Renaissance masterpieces in the UK.
The renovated Raphael Court now features acoustic panelling, LED lighting and bespoke furniture. Like other museums, the galleries of the V&A have been empty since December.
It has been a really tough year. It has been a tough year for everybody, of course. But I think, the way that V&A feels it, the galleries themselves really do feel like a ghost ship without the visitors in them. It's a building which is brought to life by the public.
Entry will be free, but visitors must observe social distancing and book in advance.
Mules may be seen as stubborn creatures by many, but for Italian lumberjack Andre Filippani, his 4 mules are part of his family and he depends on them for his livelihood.
Mules may be seen as stubborn creatures by many, but not for Italian lumberjack Andrea Filipponi. His 4 mules are part of the family, and they are also his livelihood. Filipponi is the last mularo or mule handler still working in Ferentilo, located in the lower Valnerina Valley.
They are part of the family, more than a family. Woe betide anyone who dares touch them. They are untouchable.
Filipponi uses his animal colleagues as 4-legged trucks. The mules, Bimba, Castellana, Regina and Mora, along with Filipponi's only horse Zorro, can reach areas that machinery can't quite get to. They can transport up to 440 pounds worth of logs on their backs each, from a wooded hill over 3,200 feet above the small town of Tiara in Italy's Umbria region.
First, we come here to cut trees with the chainsaws. Then we collect the wood and, with the help of mules, we transport it. In winter, we cut the trees, and in summer until October, we transport the wood until the start of the new cutting season.
Filipponi followed in his father's footsteps. He wakes up early every morning at 5 to feed and brush the mules before leaving for the physically taxing job of collecting timber. Although mules have a reputation for stubbornness, they are quick learners and faster than their horse or donkey counterparts. But the use of mules is slowly diminishing regardless, with machinery often taking their place.
This tradition ends with us. No one in the future will produce such machines.
In this segment of Strong Mind and Body, we look at 29 foods that can boost creativity. And just a warning, some of the footage may have your tummy rumbling.
Welcome to Strong Mind and Body, I'm Gina Marie. What we eat can affect our creative energies. Processed foods high in trans fats, artificial ingredients and excessive amounts of sodium and sugar can drain us of energy. These foods can leave us sick, lethargic, disease-prone and foggy. Whether it's singing and dancing while we clean the house, creating a piece of art, or changing our approach to eating, thinking outside of the box is a fulfilling and healthy part of the human experience. Try these creativity-boosting foods and see how they may help with inspiration. Complex carbohydrates. Foods rich in complex carbohydrates provides the brain with a steady stream of glucose throughout the day. Unlike simple carbohydrates like refined sugars and flours, complex carbs take longer to break down and can be better regulated by the body and the brain. Let's look at some examples. Whole grain bread, oats, quinoa, brown rice, millet, amaranth, spelt, and barley. Let's look at some good fats. Essential fatty acids play a crucial role in proper brain function. They help our brains process and understand information, which is critical for creative thinking and problem solving. Try getting a well-rounded variety of foods in your diet that are rich in all of the omegas. Some examples include hemp seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, avocados, olive oil, and coconut oil. Next, let's take a look at antioxidants. Antioxidants keep our cells healthy by preventing free radical damage, something that's especially important for the brain. Try these foods rich in a variety of potent antioxidants, including beta-carotene and vitamins C and E. Berries, any kind will do, citrus fruits, dark leafy green vegetables, broccoli, beets, yams, squash, chocolate, wheatgrass, spirulina, maca, ginseng, bee pollen, and green tea. It's also important for children to have a nourishing diet. Hippocrates said that food should be our medicine and medicine should be our food. He would probably turn in his grave if he saw the amount of highly processed sugary foods and drinks marketed to children today. Unhealthy diets also contribute to poor mental health and lower IQ in children. It's important to enjoy a variety of foods from each of the core food groups in order to get a broad range of essential nutrients.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.